My name is Rachel Chen, and this is the story of how an act of family cruelty led to the discovery of a lifetime. The old Riverside Antiques store stood at the corner of Main and Cedar, its faded brick facade a testament to 7 decades of small-town commerce. I remembered visiting it as a child, enchanted by the dusty treasures that Grandpa Joe, my husband's grandfather, would show me on the rare occasions my future mother-in-law allowed us to visit. A dreamer, Patricia Wilson would say disapprovingly, watching me explore the cramped aisles. Just like that old fool. No sense of real value. Now, 15 years later, I stood in the Wilson family's luxurious living room, surrounded by relatives eager to hear the reading of Grandpa Joe's will. My husband Tom squeezed my hand supportively as Patricia, acting as executor, began distributing the inheritances. To my son Robert and his wife Patricia, she read with satisfaction, my stock portfolio and primary residence. She smiled, knowing the portfolio alone was worth millions. To my grandson Michael, my summer house in the Hamptons. My brother-in-law grinned, already planning his parties. To my granddaughter Ashley, my collection of fine art and jewelry. My sister-in-law clutched her pearls in delight. Then Patricia's smile turned cruel as she reached the final bequest. And to my grandson Thomas and his wife Rachel, she paused for effect. I leave my antique store, Riverside Antiques, including all its contents and associated property. The room erupted in poorly concealed laughter. The store had been losing money for years, its customer base dwindling as online retailers dominated the market. The building itself was in desperate need of repairs. Here's your inheritance, Patricia smirked, tossing me a set of rusty keys. Enjoy the bankruptcy, though I suppose it's fitting. A worthless store for a worthless addition to the family. I caught the keys, feeling their weight in my palm. Tom started to protest his mother's cruelty, but I touched his arm gently. Thank you, I said quietly. Grandpa Joe always said the store was special. Patricia's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Special? The old fool spent his last years muttering about secrets and hidden treasures. He let the business go to ruin chasing fairy tales instead of selling to developers like any sensible person would. The next morning, Tom and I stood outside Riverside Antiques. The early summer sun cast long shadows through the dusty windows, illuminating shelves of old books, vintage furniture, and countless curios. Mom's right about one thing, Tom sighed as we unlocked the door. The place is in rough shape. We should probably just sell it. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the memory of Grandpa Joe's twinkling eyes when he showed me his favorite pieces, or the way he would sometimes stop mid-sentence, looking around the store with an expression that suggested he was seeing something the rest of us couldn't. Let's at least look through it properly, I suggested. Grandpa Joe spent his life building this collection. We owe him that much. The interior was like stepping back in time. Every surface held layers of history. Art Deco lamps beside Victorian silverware, mid-century modern furniture draped with vintage textiles. The air smelled of old wood, leather, and secrets. I ran my fingers along a shelf, remembering how Grandpa Joe used to quiz me about different periods and styles. He'd been delighted to find someone who shared his passion for history and craftsmanship, often letting me help him research unusual pieces that came into the store. Your mother's right about the business side, I admitted to Tom as we explored. The books show steady losses over the past 5 years. But look at these pieces. There's real value here if we know where to look. Tom picked up a dusty ledger. Dad always said Grandpa was obsessed with something in his final years. Kept talking about a discovery that would change everything. I remembered those rumors. The family had dismissed them as the ramblings of a senile old man. But I'd seen the clarity in Grandpa Joe's eyes when he spoke about his research. He wasn't confused, he was excited, like someone on the verge of a breakthrough. We spent the next few days cataloging the store's inventory. Tom focused on the financial records while I explored the collection. Every item seemed to hold a story, but nothing explained Grandpa Joe's certainty about some great discovery. On the 4th day, I was examining a wall of vintage advertising posters when something caught my eye. The wall behind one poster seemed slightly uneven, with subtle variations in the brick pattern. Tom, I called, can you help me move this? As we carefully peeled back the poster, we revealed what looked like a patch of newer bricks, slightly different in color from their surroundings. In the center was a small mark that might have been decorative, or might have been something else entirely. Look familiar? I asked, pulling out my phone and opening a photo album. This symbol, I've seen it before. The photo showed a page from one of Grandpa Joe's research notebooks, which I discovered the day before. It contained drawings of similar marks, along with cryptic notes about the Mason's legacy and hidden in plain sight. Tom ran his fingers over the mark. It's hollow behind here, he said wonderingly. The wall sounds different. We spent the next hour carefully examining the section of wall, finding subtle signs of modification. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the dusty windows, we discovered that one of the bricks could be pressed inward. There was a soft click, and a section of the wall swung open like a door. Behind it was a safe, not a modern one, but a massive antique model that looked like it had been installed when the building was constructed in the 1940s. Its surface was decorated with the same symbol we'd found on the wall. This is what he was trying to find, I whispered, remembering Grandpa Joe's determined expression during those final years. Whatever he discovered, whatever got him so excited. It must be in here. Tom stared at the safe in amazement. Can we open it? I studied the mechanism carefully. It's a Mosler from the 1940s. Grandpa Joe taught me about these. They were top of the line back then, used in banks and government buildings. But we need the combination. We spent hours searching through Grandpa Joe's papers, looking for any clue to the combination. As midnight approached, Tom reluctantly left to check on our kids at the babysitter's, while I continued searching. Around 2 a.m., I found something tucked inside an old book about antique locks. A photograph of Grandpa Joe as a young man, standing in front of the store on its opening day. On the back was a series of numbers, written in his distinctive hand. My hands trembled as I approached the safe. The combination dial turned smoothly, each number clicking into place with satisfying precision. On the final number, there was a heavy clunk, and the handle turned. Inside the safe was something that made my breath catch in my throat. But before I could process what I was seeing, I heard footsteps behind me. Well, Patricia's voice cut through the darkness. It seems the dreamer found something after all. I turned to find my mother-in-law standing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of triumph and malice. Behind her stood Michael and 2 men I didn't recognize, their suits and stern expressions suggesting they weren't there to offer congratulations. "Step away from the safe, Mrs. Chen," one of the men said, reaching into his jacket. "Federal agents, we need to have a serious conversation about what you found." The beam of the federal agent's flashlight illuminated the safe's contents, rows of carefully preserved documents, photographs, and what appeared to be old military orders, all bearing the distinctive eagle seal of the Third Reich. "Step aside, please," the first agent said, more gently this time. "I'm Agent David Cooper, FBI Art Crime Team. This is Agent Martinez. We've been monitoring this building for months." Patricia pushed forward, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I knew that old fool was hiding something valuable. As the executor of the estate, I demand. "You're not demanding anything, Mrs. Wilson," Agent Martinez cut in. "These documents fall under federal jurisdiction." I found my voice. "You've been monitoring the store. Why?" Agent Cooper began carefully removing items from the safe. "Your grandfather-in-law contacted us 6 months ago. He wanted to ensure these documents would be properly handled after his death. He just never told us exactly where they were hidden." "But what are they?" Tom's voice came from the doorway. He must have returned and heard the commotion. "Your grandfather," Agent Cooper explained, "wasn't just an antique dealer. During World War II, he was part of the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program. The Monuments Men. They were tasked with recovering artwork and cultural artifacts stolen by the Nazis." As the agents laid out the documents on a nearby table, the story began to emerge. Grandpa Joe had been stationed in Germany after the war, helping track down looted art. He discovered evidence of a massive collection, priceless works stolen from Jewish families across Europe that had never been recovered. "These documents," Agent Martinez said, pointing to a stack of yellowed papers, "appear to be original Nazi inventories and shipping records. Your grandfather spent decades cross-referencing them with insurance records and family claims." Patricia's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "Then the art. Where is it?" "That's the real discovery," I said quietly, reaching back into the safe. I pulled out a leather-bound journal, Grandpa Joe's research diary. He found it all. Every piece. The journal detailed how Joe had traced the art to various museums and private collections around the world, works that had been sold through seemingly legitimate channels, their dark history carefully hidden. He had documented everything: the original owners, the theft, the subsequent sales, and most importantly, the current locations. "This is worth millions," Patricia breathed, reaching for the journal. Agent Cooper smoothly intercepted her hand. "This isn't about money, Mrs. Wilson. These are crucial historical documents that will help return stolen artwork to the families of Holocaust victims. Your father-in-law's work will bring closure to hundreds of families." "But the store," Michael protested. "The property is part of something much bigger," I interrupted, understanding finally dawning. I opened another folder from the safe, revealing architectural plans of the entire block. Grandpa Joe didn't just own the store. He bought the whole building, and the one next door, through a separate holding company. Tom took the plans, his eyes widening. "These buildings, they're in the middle of the proposed Heritage District Development Zone." I nodded. "The developer that's been buying up downtown properties, they can't complete their project without these buildings." Grandpa Joe knew that. He also knew the historical significance of his discovery would make it impossible for them to tear down this site. Agent Cooper smiled. Mr. Wilson was very clear about his wishes. The buildings are to be converted into a research center and museum, dedicated to documenting the ongoing effort to return stolen art to its rightful owners. The FBI's art crime team will be establishing a permanent office here. Patricia looked like she was about to faint. But the inheritance is exactly what Grandpa Joe intended," I said firmly. "A chance to be part of something meaningful, something that helps bring justice to families who lost everything. The store wasn't worthless, it was priceless, just not in the way you measure value." Over the next year, Riverside Antiques transformed. The retail space became a public museum, telling the story of the Monuments Men and the ongoing fight to return stolen art. The upstairs offices housed researchers and FBI agents working to trace artwork using Grandpa Joe's meticulous records. Tom and I were appointed to the museum's board of directors, along with representatives from various Holocaust survivor organizations. The developer, eager to salvage their project, agreed to restore both buildings to their historic glory and incorporate them into their plans as a cultural centerpiece. Patricia and the rest of the family were forced to watch from the sidelines as international media covered the museum's opening. "Local antique store reveals Nazi looted art secret," the headlines read. "World War II hero's final mission completed." 1 year after discovering the safe, I sat in what had been Grandpa Joe's office, now restored to its 1940s appearance. On the wall hung the last photo taken of him, standing proud in his Monuments Men uniform. Below was a framed letter we'd found in the safe, addressed to Tom and me. "Dear Tom and Rachel, I'm trusting you with my life's real work. Not the antiques, though Rachel's love for them warmed my heart, but the truth hidden within these walls. Some will say it's worthless, that the past should stay buried. They're wrong. Every artwork returned, every family given back a piece of their heritage, adds immeasurable value to our world. The store is your inheritance, yes, but the real legacy is the chance to continue this work, to show that some things are worth more than money: truth, justice, and the obligation to right historical wrongs. Rachel, you saw value where others saw dust. You understood that every object tells a story, carries a history. That's why I knew you were the right one to find this. Take care of my life's work, make it grow. And remember, true worth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the wrongs we help make right. With love and trust, Grandpa Joe." The letter had become the centerpiece of the museum's final exhibit, alongside photographs of reunited families and recovered artwork. Patricia never apologized for her cruelty, but her social circle's admiration for the museum's work was punishment enough. The worthless store now hosts international conferences on art restitution. Researchers and law enforcement officers from around the world come to study Grandpa Joe's methods. Each recovered artwork, each family reunited with their lost heritage, adds to his legacy. Tom and I still live above the store in the apartment where Grandpa Joe spent his final years. Sometimes late at night, I walk through the museum when it's empty. The old floorboards still creak in the same places, and if I close my eyes, I can almost hear Grandpa Joe's voice teaching me about the stories hidden in everyday objects. The safe remains in its place behind the wall, now part of the museum's exhibit. Its empty interior reminds visitors that sometimes the most valuable things can't be measured in gold or silver, but in the truth they protect and the justice they help deliver. As for Patricia and the family, they received something far more valuable than property or stocks, a lesson about the true meaning of worth. Every time another artwork is returned to its rightful owners, every time another family finds closure, they're reminded of how wrong they were about the worthless old store and the dreamer who saw its true value. Grandpa Joe's final gift wasn't just a building or a collection of documents. It was a mission, a purpose, and a reminder that real value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes it's hidden behind old posters, waiting for someone who cares enough to look deeper, to see beyond the surface to the priceless truth within. The store that was meant to be my humiliation became my greatest honor. Every morning, as I unlock the museum's doors, I think of Grandpa Joe and smile, knowing that sometimes the most precious inheritances are the ones that money can't buy.